to give you a background on my talk might sound like a social science talk, but I'm not a social scientist. I'm an engineer by training, and over the years I've got more and more into the human side of things. And not long ago, I served for a short period of time in politics as one of the very high levels, unusual for academics. I was the deputy vice president of Iran and the deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment. Got accused of being a spy because I was talking too much, I guess. And then I had to run away and was in hiding and recently came out of hiding. Still don't know where it's safe for me. So I'm going to share some of the things and findings and observations I had in the policy world. And as a scientist being there and really being a spy on government and seeing what's going on, I think those are worthy of sharing. So I hope I don't disappoint the host who invited me to this session to talk about water. I talk about water, but very briefly. I'd like to talk about resilience and other matters. As a reminder, you can send your questions to this email address before 9:30, I've been told. Talking about water, I mean, we heard two talks, one about sea level rise, one about air pollution, now about water. When it comes to water, to me, the word is also ending. The sky is falling. The situation is really bad. We don't know whether we have passed the tipping point or not. The situation is horrible. And in my world, I think without water, none of the other, it doesn't matter what else you have done for the society, you cannot run forward. So I call it the water bankruptcy problem. I even think it's not a crisis anymore. We are past the tipping point. We cannot recover from in many cases, and we cannot restore the system in many cases. So beside mitigation, we also need adaptation. We have learned it in the climate change world, but not in the water world, as we are still trying to find more and more resources and damage more resources. Now, as I said, in my world, without water, you can't function, and doesn't matter. I mean, I think the difference between me and the first speaker is like she sees too much water, I don't see any water. So speaking about these things, I want to get your attention to the fact that society is full of problems and resilience is not about one sector. But in my world, so then I have all these fancy suggestions as other water people and other people in water management. Some of us do different things, but if you're an engineer, you always want to go for more technology, new resources than as economists or policy people. You talk about removing subsidies, you raising prices, change all the existing things and the existing settings of institutions and do things differently. And through this, you can save water. You can restore some of the existing systems, help with the aquifer recharge, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people are really, I think, tired of these things because they hear them on and on, every day, on a daily basis, and everyone is good in theory. But that's my word. And in my world, then I go and try to find what's fair, how this should be done in an equal manner, in a fair manner, implement justice, and we always come up with, more and more solutions. We try to think about all the stakeholders, all people who are using water in some sort. We know that these problems are multi-objective problems or many objective problems. We take into account those and then go for the group consider the group rationality and try to maximize the benefits for all, and then as a person who prescribes for the society, I come out with good solutions in the water sector and want the policymaker and people to listen to me and do it. Now, when I do it as a scientist, thinking into the with foresight into the future, I think about cooperation, maximizing total benefits of the system, and also long-term benefits. Now let's go into the policy world, where cheap talk is an option. You can make good promises and gestures and all these things. And if you look at what the politicians say, in many cases they're making promises that we as scientists even think they're too ambitious, even in the environmental world, whatever they talk about. A good example, 2015, Paris Agreement and all these things. And just so you know, I was one of them at some point. So I was in the last round of negotiations, head of the Iranian delegation, where I was actually in those negotiations trying to get some attention also to the water matter, because as a water person, I think Paris Agreement totally ignores water as a component, and because it's energy dominated because of the politics there. But there, you make a lot of good promises, and talk about things. But now, what do you deliver those, right? For them, for the politicians, a lot of times we think they're stupid, we think they're irrational, we think they don't know what they're doing, but their word is different. Their word is not about cooperation necessarily, full cooperation among all parties, because you take advantage of competition, you take advantage of conflicts, and that's healthy to your survival, to attention to you, and so on. And it's not about long-term benefits. It's about short-term benefit maximization. That's a different world. Whether we like it or not, that's how things function. Now, in their world, so when I say they understand that water shortage exists, they understand that water is a problem, but my solutions to them are not helpful. Why? Because when I talk about water, I only see water, but in their policy agenda, oil and energy makes more sense because it's about short-term benefits. It's about economy. It's about visible effects on the economy. Food matters to them. But you can't not only talk about water. In some parts of the world, food security is even a political issue in a place like Iran, for example. How about the economics of the agricultural sector? See the trade war between the U.S., China, and all these effects on the global economy, and then you tweak something in one sector. So the economy and matters. I mean, U.S. indeed actually manipulates the whole world crop price and commodity price in many cases. So there is a war there. And when I talk about water, I ignore them. But the policymaker sees all these things, actually. So then how about jobs? Am I considering the number of jobs which are tied to the water sector and any reform in the water sector, in the agricultural sector, means loss of jobs for people? Do I see the facts about inflation, how this affects my economy when I talk about removing subsidies, raising prices, and so on? And then now the question is, right now at this point in time, which one of these guys is more popular? We make fun of Trump, we make fun of his policies and so on, but he is communicating to the public who care about the things that he cares about, and they have a good relationship. Whereas Macron seems an unrealistic guy, too ambitious, making a lot of promises about cutting carbon, doing this, doing that, and raising taxes, thinking about long-term, and so on. What's the difference? And now in this situation, now the guy has to back up, change his policies, whereas Trump is getting more and more aggressive in many cases because of the support he has from the public that we are ignoring in many of our situations. So I want to argue that many of us live in our superficial life and boundaries, and we set boundaries for our systems while we're dealing with a super complex system. So the boundaries I impose on my problem don't exist. Water is not really water, and if it's water, it's just part of a big system. Perfect cooperation does not exist. People do not make decisions based on group rationality. And these are the facts that we are ignoring. So we are dealing with a super complex problem. I only deal with water out of this system of systems of human nature system of systems, which is a super complex thing. Now, within this, you have smaller dots, which is air pollution, sea level rise, climate change, water, and all these things, right? So food is one sector, energy is one sector, but you also have other sectors, like, toward the left, jobs, economy, politics, inflation, like other matters, like how you dominate in other parts of the world, war, like all these things that we ignore. Now, my word is water, or if I claim to be very interdisciplinary, I'm somewhere at the nexus of water, food, energy, environment, and all that. But the politicians are hanging out somewhere else that is more important, because they're thinking about re-election. They're thinking about the things which matter to the society in the short run. But how do you determine what matters to the society, and how do we deal with that? So in this environment, then, my solution to them is garbage. They even think I'm manipulating them. I'm a spy working for Mossad and CIA, trying to make, to ruin Iran and give bad solutions. And the same thing, right? We think that some of the solutions given by the policymakers are garbage and don't function. So then we get into this battle of who's smarter, who's not, who's more emotional. But the reality is that we can stand on both ways. We can be the people who don't understand the public. We don't understand what's happening. Look at the whole world and, the things we missed about Brexit, we missed about, Trump coming out of the election, all the extremism that we're seeing in different parts of the world in places that we thought people understand the value of society, value of cooperation, value of democracy, and so on, right? And all of these, my argument now is it's a counterintuitive finding for me as a person who always was very proud, I would say, or I thought I was successful by hanging out at the science policy interface. At a science policy interface, you get you even put it in your tenure package, and you're proud of the fact that you're asked to testify in a parliament or talk to a parliament member or go to this minister. Your research results are being observed by them. They pay attention to it, and it feels good. Media picks it up, and so on. But the reality was that when I was sitting at that position, I had the authority to make decisions. I knew a lot of problems. Of course, there are the issues of priorities, right? Do I deal with air pollution, which is a visible problem? People are suffering right now, or water, which is a long-term problem. It's not visible most of the time. Do I deal with climate change in a country like Iran at the moment, or many other problems I have in pollution, waste, biodiversity losses, and then jobs, economy, sanctions, and all these things that I'm dealing with. And then it's the issue of priorities. And who determines the priority? So we have the chicken and egg problem. In order to have people who care about climate change and environment and water and all these matters, we have to have governments who care about education, informing people, bringing these issues up, telling them about the future and what matters and how it affects their lives. And in order to have politicians who are that way and climate sensitive or environmental sensitive, you have to have a community of people who care about those matters, right? And this is where I see our role. And the question for me is, do I really hang out with the people I need to hang out with? Do I really communicate directly with the public rather than being proud of, going to the minister's room and briefing him on my results or her on my results? Do I talk to the people who are affected by our decisions? Because once they know, and this was my trick when I got into this job, that whenever I wanted to move my agenda forward, I was talking to people directly. I was trying to create a sense of urgency. I was trying to create a sense of partnership, giving them a role about the things that matter, their opinion on things, their solutions, and so on. So the reality is that we need to put pressure on and weight on the shoulders of the policymakers. But to do that, we need to keep the sensitivity level of the society high. And it's really hard where you're dealing with a range of problems. Disasters are good. Extreme cases are good because that's for a limited period of time, the weights are on the shoulders. But they go away quite quickly if you don't continue insisting and working on them. And I want to conclude my conversation with this, that let's not misuse the term resilience as we did in the case of sustainable development. These terms are not too different, honestly. It's just like these are cycles. We go from one term to another. Resilience, like sustainable development, is a system of systems concept. It's about the whole system. It's not about pieces. And we often make a mistake that we think the summation of sustainable pieces is sustainable, the summation of resilient pieces is resilient, and that's not true. Thank you.